Welcome to the 8 Minute Rule podcast, where actual physical therapists share clinical pearls designed to create conversation around what's getting results in the clinic. No fluff, no Medicare stopwatch, only quality content. Welcome again to the 8 Minute Rule. Got Drew and Mark here on for another big picture topic, talking about some quality care. So let's open it up. Nice little definition question here. What is quality care? Specifically looking at physical therapists. So Drew, how about you start us off?
Probably at least 8 minutes per unit is what I would say of good quality. No,
Nice time
so
definition there.
quality care is giving the patient what they need. My favorite quote from our former CEO, Jeff Hathaway, was more isn't better, less isn't better, better is better. And so determining what that patient needs for that specific time period at that specific day is the key. And that could be 10 minutes, it could be an hour. And so it's going to vary based on patient needs every time.
Good start there. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, just beginning with the end in mind, the outcomes are important. So, doing what Drew said, giving the patient what they need to drive the outcome. And that's both like the perceived outcome, like from the physical therapist, as well as what the patient experiences themselves, what their perception of their outcome is as well.
Yeah, I like that. I think that was going to be my next question is how much of quality care do you think in you guys experience, and again, you've had clinicians under your watch here for a little while. So how much do you think quality care is driven by patient perspective versus therapist perspective?
Yeah. I actually have some research on this, and the the actual time spent with the patient is not as important as the perceived quality of it. Patients will often say that the amount of time is valuable, so they do value the amount of time that a clinician does spend with them. But there's a lot of ways that you can increase the amount of perceived time by connecting with the patient, addressing their needs, asking the right questions. And you'll see that a lot of the patients, when they start doing that, the quality, they do end up valuing that more than quantity, but they'll also say that quality time felt like a whole lot more time than just time that you're around and counting reps and doing all those other things. And then in its really similar research, they looked at how rushed clinicians felt versus patients. And I think it was around 15 or 20% of the visits. This was a physician research thing. So they said 15 to 20% of the visits felt rushed for the clinician, but less than 3% of the patients said they reported it, they felt like it was rushed. So there's definitely a difference in what is perceived by the therapist versus the patient a lot of times.
Yeah, I like that. What you think, Mark?
Yeah, I think that's a good example of like checking your own biases. Like when you think, oh man, I'm struggling right now, and the patients have no perception that you are actually struggling to keep up with things. One thing that Lucas had told me before, Lucas, one of my mentors, that really stuck with me was, we have a finite amount of time with patients, and in busy clinics, that amount of time may be different, given how busy you are in any particular day. Said that any interaction that you have with the patient is an opportunity to improve their outcome. And his perception of it was like, you better believe that I'm going to take every opportunity that I can, all of those little interactions, to try to maximize their outcome as much as I possibly can. And so, when you're, making small talk with the patient, it's intentional. It's not just like, oh, what'd you do? This is what I did. Like, it's not just small talk. It is with intent. Like, I'm trying to connect with this patient. I'm trying to find some common ground, some shared, experiences that we can tie into, what's going on, or at least build trust with the patient. Like, there's always a purpose to what you're doing. And that's something that really stuck with me, and something that I try to incorporate whenever I possibly can too.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thought. As we kind of zoom back to the big question, I couldn't help but think about I had a clinician one time that, as we were getting her started, it kind of started with 1 hour appointments. We don't really do that anymore, even from a start standpoint, but she still would get rushed and say, she'd have like a patient or two a day reporting that they weren't getting enough time with her. And then I had another guy that actually interviewed a month ago that sees patients on the 45s, but it's doubled every day, every time. And so he's seeing about 80 visits a week and saying that like he feels like he'd be bored with more time. And so I'm not advocating for either of those schedules. What I'm just saying in general is that it's interesting how, it doesn't necessarily seem to be that a certain amount of time is going to dictate whether or not they're going to have enough time with your patient. And that's the same thing you guys are saying, but that, over years and years, I've just continued to see that patients want value. Yes, there are some that are going to be so fixated on time, but if we feel rushed, if we're looking at the clock, if we're telling them, oh, what time did you get here? "Oh, I think you're here till 12. That's the stuff is like nails on a chalkboard to me, right? Like I don't want any of my clinicians looking at the clock or talking about the time, which is hard, right? I get it. Like I know the parameters we work with them, but if you take a step back and realize how that small little action has such a bearing on patients, like they notice that and recognize that. What's cool though is thinking about, being able to really trim the fluff. And as you said, one, intentionality at a time. I really appreciate that thought, Mark. But two, also being able to say, I think I remember when I was in about my second or third year trying to challenge myself, like, all right, can I look at like 15 to 20 minutes of just intense, like if this was the only time I have with this patient, like what would I do? And just really trimming down to hey, the most important stuff. And it was amazing how much you can get accomplished in that time when you're incredibly intentional with your time with a patient. And so I think there's some value for us as clinicians to being able to challenge ourselves in that way because it does force us to really get down to the meat. And I think when we do that, we start to realize that, I mean, yeah, some patients are here and just want to be here a long time, but a lot of patients just want to get better. And whether they get better in a short amount of time or a long amount of time, it's kind of up to how we're going to structure things. So I think it does fall on us for how we set the expectations and how we go about that too.
Yeah, Jordan, I really like that thought too, because this may lead into a total different conversation. But, if I can get a patient better in 30 minutes when it takes someone else an hour, shouldn't I get paid more for that 30 minutes than someone else does for that hour? Not to get a total
Isn't that
sidebar
what
there,
MIPS is
but
doing? Isn't MIPS going to save the day in that way?
yeah, we'll see about that. But I think if you are very locked in with your patients, even if it is for that short 15-minute period of time, if you're locked in and you go through clinical reasoning and it's very methodical and they can kind of follow the process, they're going to find that tremendously beneficial and distinctly different than other PTs and other professions in general.
I agree. I think the time on the clock and our units have made us think way too much about how important time is. Because I've had patients who come in and they're late and they're like, you know what, I've got to be out of here in 20 minutes. I'm like, okay, what do you need to get done today? And we get it done and they leave and they're so happy. And it's 20 minutes. And we think, my gosh, now granted, I don't get paid much for that, which sucks. But they are very happy with what they got because they got exactly what they needed.
Yeah, and is that 20 minutes better than waiting a week
Yeah.
and getting 20 minutes? I don't know. I mean, but what you did was you gave that option to the patient, which I think that's a big key here too. And we talk about it all the time. I'm not telling you got to tell a patient, hey, you need to be okay with this because you were late. But if you give them the option, absolutely, I think there's a ton of value there. So good thoughts as always. Until next time.